Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Barbara Tien with Projectkin, and absolutely delighted to have you and this wonderful assembled audience today to welcome Rhonda Lauritzen of Evolog Life. Rhonda has been a dear friend to Projectkin and my previous enterprise, and really a strong supporter since day one. And I think we've always connected on the subject of stories, and stories are at the core of what fuels me. And honestly, I think it's the hard stuff that does that. These are the stories that I am still working my way up to be able to tell. And forms and factors and spaces and places are so much a part of what I try to encourage and support. And it is why, from my view, Projectkin as a community shall remain free, because I think I'm not in the business of making money on your stories. I want you to have ways to get your stories told and encourage those around you to share their truths and their stories. And that's what we're really here for. So, Rhonda, I don't even know where to begin in terms of sharing your background. Many of you will have seen that both in the notes and the details in the setup to all of this. Certainly, you know her for Evolog Life, with her many years of working with clients, getting their stories told, to the biographies that she has written with clients, for clients, and encouraging of clients, and her teaching, her programs, to bring that out, including one of my all-time favorites for Projectkin, which was the story for our All About That Place series back in 2024, the Curious Call of Ancestral Places, which was great fun. But more about that later. What we're going to do now is just get to the meat of this. And with that, let me back down and take it away, Rhonda.
Thank you so much. It's just a delight to be here. I see so many familiar faces. I've given some of you a shout out. I'm Katie, I see you now. Anyway, we'll get going, but such a kindred place to be. For those of you that came from my email list, I hope you will reach out to Barbara and subscribe to Projectkin and this broader community of family storytellers too. But with that, let's get to it. So I've put in the chat some links for you that I'll talk about at different points in the presentation, but I have a free toolkit for you. So if you want to get some additional resources that I've put together on navigating sensitivities and trauma, you can get that at evolog.life/sensitive2, or you can grab this QR code, or it's in the chat. So I'll flash this up again. I'm sure people will ask again. So when I first started telling family stories, I had a view of my family that looked a lot like this. Things were good. I grew up in a wonderful family. Now, I realize that some of you may not be here because your family looked like this. Maybe it didn't. Most of us really, when we get down to it, have some other issues. But this is kind of the view I started. We're going to tell a wonderful, happy family story that will uplift and inspire. And to give you an idea, I just want to give you a 30, I guess this is 90-second little video about my parents to just show you the love that I was raised with. And we'll talk later about what I didn't see coming. So here's a little video to just introduce me.
Then come sit by my side if you love me. Do not hasten to bid me adieu, but remember the Red River Valley and the cowboy that loved you so true.
This is my wife, and I want to talk a little bit about her to begin with, because without her, I'm zero. I'm pretty good on the ideas, but I ain't very good on the follow through. I've always considered my wife a very beautiful woman. I've never considered her cute or anything like that. She's always been gorgeous. are beautiful, and she made me want to do better. And that's why she's the spark.
Then
So that's the place from which I started on my own family's story. I started this work completely by accident. I had a different job. I wasn't trained to be a writer, but I got the call, a sort of emotional, spiritual call. And I started coincidentally, I don't think it's coincidence at all, but I started writing the day my dad died. And I learned that he had died in the middle of my first writing session. And I wanted to tell their story, and I wanted to tell about being raised in a family business with 6 brothers and their faith and the things they'd taught me and the love. So that's where I started. And there were some things I didn't see coming. First of all, I grew up in a family business, which is great until it's not. Also, I have 6 brothers. And let me tell you, I learned one thing, and that is siblings are touchy. So, if you're going to write about your siblings, there may be some things you do see coming and some things you don't. If you're going to write about your parents' siblings and they're still living, or if you're writing for a client and there are children involved, expect some sensitivities. So, we'll talk about that in a minute. But I do believe that true stories bring people together. They inspire. They help us understand what we're made of. They can show children who they're meant to become. And so that's the real goal behind what we do. But to get there, what could possibly go wrong, right? This is a picture of me and my brothers. In working in a family business, as I mentioned, things are good until they're not. And boy, I've been through it with them. And I am working again with my brothers, some of my brothers, some I don't have a relationship with as much today because there were things. Anyway, we'll just leave it at this. So we're going to talk today about some of the things that could possibly go wrong. You may be in the thick of it right now, and I'm going to give you some tools and wisdom and lessons learned over 15 years of storytelling with families, because let me tell you, I've never worked on a family story when something didn't throw us for a loop. And this is the stuff that will kick you in the gut. You might be going along and you're inspired, but when you encounter a sensitivity or a trauma in your own past or a secret, it's the time when you might think, I can't do this. I don't know if I can finish this. And that's why I'm here, because I want you to finish and I want to help you ultimately find healing and growth through the process and not get stopped cold in your tracks. So some of the things that could go wrong: DNA surprises or surprises in the paper trail, abuse, addictions, mental health, suicide, crime, or unsavory activities of our family members in the past or present, emotional immaturity. Do any of you in this room think of you maybe you've never heard this book or thought of yourself this way, but adult children of emotionally immature parents. Oof. I put a link to a book on that topic because there are patterns intergenerationally that some of us, we don't have the parent. I had wonderful parents. I really did. We weren't perfect, but they were great. But I've seen enough that not everyone has good parents. Abandonment or feelings of abandonment or war and other trauma. So I'll talk about my own family and some little case studies as we go, but I'm also going to give a little case study of a story that I worked on for over 5 years relating to growing up in a war zone. Heidi Posnine, which I'll talk about more in a minute, grew up as a child in World War II, and she had to unpack a lot of trauma from the war. And so I'm going to show you a quick 30-second overview of her story, and I'll share a little bit more about her and what we learned about family storytelling and the hard stuff through that case as well. So here's a little clip to overview.
In 1939, a Polish singer leaves the countryside to join the state opera in Berlin. Her young daughter Heidi soon joins her. In Berlin, Kata's dreams are coming true as she dates a Wehrmacht officer, but when Kata learns what is happening to her Jewish friends, she must make a choice. Heidi's ultimate test comes when she must survive alone in a bombed-out apartment at the age of 9.
I mean, can you imagine being alone at the age of 9 in a war zone? It was something that she couldn't talk about for many, many years. For most of her life, she would tell people maybe bits and pieces, but most of her story she wasn't really ready to tell until she was in her 80s. And now, at the age of 90, she's turning 90 next week, she's telling her story and healing and helping other people understand an important part of history. But she wasn't ready to talk about it right away. So I'm going to ask you a question. Where are you right now? You may have a sensitive topic that you're thinking about. Why did you sign up for this class, right? You're not here because this just sounded like fun. You're probably here because you're unpacking something. So the question is, where are you in the process of processing? And I ask because there are different techniques to lean upon and different things to do when you're at different parts of the process. If you are in the middle of an active situation, abuse, a divorce, just barely uncovering unsettling information, you're just surviving right now. You're just trying to figure out which way is up. That's the surviving stage. That's not the same. That's not the time to tell your story publicly, right? That's the kind of the takeaway there. We'll talk more, but then you're in a phase after you've kind of out of the immediate situation, when you're in the middle and you're processing it and you have a little distance and you're trying to understand what happened and what it meant and what you're supposed to do with it. And then after you've come out the other side, when you've healed, then is the time to share the story more publicly. And we'll talk about each of these phases and some of the ideas for them. So first, let's talk about when not to share. Yeah, if you're still in the middle. If you're in the middle of that ugly divorce, you probably don't want to tell all the details on social media, right? Your 583 friends are not the people who should be privy to that story. And you haven't fully processed it yet. I've heard advice that maybe you shouldn't write about that divorce until a good 10 years have passed, especially if this is the mother or father of your children. Just give it a minute, right? We need some time. Don't share it if doing so would only drive a wedge. There's some things that bringing up, no good comes of it. You're just bringing up things that make people upset. So think about, does it drive a wedge or does it help facilitate healing? Would telling only hurt others? You might be dealing with someone who is in the final stages of their life and they don't want to know. They don't need to know. It would only hurt them and upset them, and it's for you to unpack and not for them. Here's another one. If it's not your right to share it. When I grew up, my mother would tell me, if you're not a party to the story, if it's not about you, then that's gossip. So maybe it's not your right to tell the story. So consider, is it or isn't it? If the hearer has not earned the right. If you have something in your past that's traumatic, that you're not proud of, a mistake that you've made, there are certain people who will love you no matter what. Those are your people to open up, to unburden with, to help process, to lean on. But not everyone is that way. Some people will judge you. Some people don't need to know the details of your mistakes, right? So just consider whether they have earned your trust and tell those people and lean on those people. And you might have 3 people of those in your life, right? And what's your motive? Is your motive to settle a score? To expose the terrible things that someone did to you? You may have reasons, good reasons to do so, and we'll talk about good reasons in a minute, but just settling a score is not a good reason, and I'm telling you, no good will come of it. Don't do it. Just don't. It generally only makes you look bad. So process it privately and consider your motive. So again, there are different types of writing for different purposes and times in your life. So a journal is just such a wonderful way to unburden. It will save your friendships, right? Even your best friends, even your person can only handle so much. Your spouse, whatever. unburden in a private. Do you see the word private there? Private. Not all journals are meant for public consumption either. Have you ever thought about that? What are you going to do with your journals? What do you want done with them? Decide and tell somebody. Because your private journals are not necessarily meant for public consumption. They might be for the purpose of informing you as you formally write your life story in a version that is meant for public consumption. But don't let your children inherit it and then wonder, what should I do with this? I had a student come up to me once and say, I inherited my mother's journal and I'm reading them and I am really uncomfortable and I'm not sure I should be reading them. What do I do with this? I mean, don't do that to your kids, guys. I'm not going to do that to my daughter. My best friend has instructions for what to do with my private journals. So I'm hoping to write my own story, but just, yeah, destroy them. I went through a divorce and there's a journal that I burned because I didn't need to keep. It wasn't my finest hour, guys. It wasn't. And that was my vomiting every ugly thing that I was feeling. I didn't need to keep it. I let it go. It's okay. So as I mentioned, Unburden with a Friend, this is my BFF that I've known since I was 13. We have saved each other thousands and thousands of dollars in therapy. You need a person. So who is your person? Consider, is your person wise? Is your person grounded? Some people, if you go to a person, there's some people who will rile you up and they might be on your side and they might be like, yeah, you go get that person. You tell. No. Have a grounded and wise person who might talk you off the ledge and listen without reacting, right? Who can handle it. So consider my person is wise. She could be a therapist. Probably so could I. Wasn't my calling in life, but there's much of what I do in oral history that feels a lot like therapy. It's not. I don't have a license, but I'm pretty good at listening and letting people unburden, and it's one of my gifts. And if you have that gift, we'll talk a little bit about how to help you recover after oral history, for example. You need some recovery time, but you're giving a wonderful gift to people. But narrative therapy. So you may need, I talked about friends saving therapy, but there are limits, there are practical limits to that. And there is a time to seek formal therapy. It can be an amazing resource. And we live in a day, I've been learning about Better Health. It's a subscription where you can get therapy via Zoom. There are AI resources. We won't talk about that today. That's a whole nother topic, but we live in a time when you can get support. And please do, because you might not realize that uncovering things in your past are going to throw you, and they might make you physically sick at times. You might need more support than you realize at this phase. But the thing about narrative therapy that's interesting is it's a branch of therapy that recognizes that we are telling ourselves a story about our lives all the time. And we're not even aware of it, but it is happening every day, all the time. And we have deep-seated stories that we've been telling ourselves about our past. When the facts are few, the actual objective facts are, maybe 5 things that actually happened, and the rest of it is a story we're telling about ourselves. And that story may no longer be serving us. It might not be a helpful narrative. And in narrative therapy, they recognize that as long as we keep telling ourselves an unhelpful narrative, we can't grow. So what they do is they help us identify the story that we've been telling and reframe it into something that involves growth and becoming a survivor instead of a victim, just for example. So that's a helpful thing to consider. There's something else called therapeutic journaling. And it's actually a pretty simple practice. I've included a link in the notes to an article I wrote about journaling and different types of journaling, but I've got some details there about therapeutic journaling. And this is what the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs says about it. Therapeutic journaling has been shown to be just as effective as trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. That's a mouthful, but basically traditional therapy, which can be time-consuming and expensive. It is considered an evidence-based treatment. Therapeutic journaling can also be a way to reach people who are unwilling or unable to engage in psychotherapy. So it's a formal practice. You can read about how to do it, but powerful stuff. So tools for yourself. We talked about some processing and getting support. When you've kind of come out the other side and you're ready to share, that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today. So when should you share the hard stuff? When you're out the other side and you've healed and you've got some perspective. When you need to speak your truth, when you feel called or compelled to come forward. It's powerful when victims speak, to get the ugly things out of the dark that may have been thriving in the dank, dark places for generations. We have an opportunity to bring these things into the light so that they can shrivel up in the disinfecting power of sunlight. We live in a day when that's possible. Others may have a right to know what happened. They may need to know the patterns in your family so that they can heal and recover. You may need to prevent harm and heal abuse. If you know of a pattern of abuse in your family, it may be time to come forward, because abuse tends to have patterns. And if there's one victim, there may be more. And there may be people who are in danger because of your silence. And I've personally been involved in family situations where victims came forward and there were more victims. And that was why the victim came forward. So that's a consideration. Whew, I know that's so heavy. So on the upside, we can share hard things to uplift and inspire, to recognize that our ancestors survived things that were hard. They survived and we're here because of it. And we're tough because we inherited that from them. And also because problems turn pages. If you're writing your narrative, hard things are compelling and they make us wonder how the hero is going to get out of this difficult situation. Problems are what make us curious and make us want to keep reading. So if you want to write a page turner, write about the hard stuff, right? So that's another good reason to do it. I mentioned oral history. This is Heidi today, that 9-year-old girl who grew up in Berlin and lived alone. And she is beautiful and radiant. And if you've been at any of my classes, maybe you've seen this picture, because I adore this woman. And this is not a staged photo. This was me sitting across from her one day on her patio with a lavalier mic on, and she's reading love letters. And it was a profound privilege to hear all about the difficult things that she experienced in the war and to bring her story. We spent 5 years together working on her story and making it into a book, which I have behind me. And I mentioned, but as I mentioned, oral history can be incredibly therapeutic for the speaker. I've been hired to take an interview from one person, one story, in which they've told me some of the most profound experiences of their entire life that they haven't told people before. I've heard people unburden things, secrets that they haven't shared before because they're at the end of their life. So if you are a person who gathers oral history, consider the responsibility that you have to be a sensitive, open, compassionate listener, to handle their tears, to have tissues nearby, to not break the silence, to just let them speak and to be a container for it, to honor the fact that their story is confidential and that they own it. And if they tell you, it's up to them to decide how it gets shared further. So you have a responsibility as well. That's just a couple of quick notes about oral history. But I want to share with you my very most favoritist, that's the wrong word, but my favorite interview question of all time. And this is, tell me about a time you didn't know if you would make it. This isn't the question you lead with, right? We start with open icebreakers and openers, and we gain trust. And it might be several interviews even into it before we talk about this really hard stuff. And it doesn't have to be something, incredibly traumatic. It could be a time when someone was in some mischief and they didn't know how they were going to get out of it. It could be physical danger. It could be, caught in a storm. It could be cancer. It could be their marriage or your marriage. It could be a time your business didn't know if you could make it. But this is the stuff that shows what you're made of, that shows the person that you're talking to what they're made of. And it's the story that you want to look for in your ancestors as well. What were the times when they weren't sure? Now, obviously, with ancestors, we may not know what they were thinking. But if you are approaching stories with the mindset of what were the times that tested them most, and what can we learn about that, and what do we want to share with people about it? So now I'm going to share with you a little piece of Heidi's story. You're going to hear her voice. And this I'm going to show you the context in which she told this story. She, as I mentioned, was 89 years old when she was ready to talk publicly. And she was invited by National Public Radio, the local station, to come on air. It wasn't live, they edited it, but to tell her story to, I don't know how many people heard it, but a lot. Talk about brave at that age. And she and I sat across, this is Pamela McCall, the interviewer. We sat on the other side of this wall, and she opened up and told the time when Heidi didn't know if she could make it. And it was a time she was 9 and she was alone in the apartment, and a bomb went off in the night and she couldn't make it to the bomb shelter fast enough. It blew the windows out and she stood there and watched the city burn, including the facade being blown off of a home across the street in which she had spent so much time with this dear couple who were so kind to her. She said it looked like a dollhouse, the facade blown off. So here is Heidi telling her story.
You could see the fire in the back, and it was all lit up. All that glass was broken, and you could see how little by little everything was burning. The table, the clock, the sofa where we used to be laying on, where the husband would read stories to me. Yeah, and it was cold, and glass was all over my bed. And then it all burned down, and I curled up and cried myself to sleep.
Wow, right? That's Heidi at age 89. And beautiful and radiant and with her light intact. And she's an inspiration. I'll tell you, my best friend, her daughter is a young adult, and she looks to Heidi as an inspiration for someone who came out of the hard things, not a victim, right? As someone who wants to share and who has joy and humor and sees her strength in herself. So this is what telling our story can do for young people. Give us a model for how to be. Let's move forward. So now that's some of the inspiration on why. Let's get practical now. Let's talk about how to move forward and do this hard thing. The first thing is, you may not like this advice, guys, because in the notes, I'm guaranteeing you there are some questions in the chat, and my answer is going to be, you need to embrace a mindset of grappling, because I can't give you the answer. Because your situation is so incredibly personal that there are an incredible number of variables, and what would be right for one family might be terrible advice given your family, your situation, your personality. And if I were to just rush in and give you a glib answer, I might be giving you the worst advice of my life. So I can give you some considerations and thoughts, but you're going to need to sit with it. And I just call it grappling because it involves journaling and bouncing things off of your trusted person and thinking. And I'm a prayerful person, so I speak these questions aloud to my higher power and we talk about it. Maybe I just like to hear my own voice. I don't know, but I'm looking for wisdom from a place within. And I don't know how long it takes to grapple, but what I know is that there always comes a moment when I know. It's just a feeling, a sense inside of what I'm supposed to do. And when that moment happens, then I try and proceed with bravery and faith on the very next step. It might be having a hard conversation. It might be just a flash of inspiration about the specific words that I should use that capture the situation with balanced sensitivity. So yeah, this stuff is hard because it's hard. And be patient with yourself and give it a little time. Do not rush into a quick answer because you might regret it. Just do the work and be patient. Then the next thing you also might not like is get your heart in the right place. Because especially, oh my gosh, we talked about siblings and we are going to trigger each other. We do. And we will say something. So let's say you're writing your life story, your family story, like I did. I'm writing my parents' stories. And I write something that I did thought was totally innocuous, and it hurt my brother's feelings. And it made him, because it triggered something in him. And I just thought that he was overly sensitive and, you have a chip on your shoulder, and maybe he did. No. These are the things we think, right? You just have a chip on your shoulder. Why don't you just get over it and stop being a middle child? Okay. Get your heart in the right place before you have that conversation. Because in writing my parents' story, my goal was to write a version that we could all more or less live with. And I wanted to bring us together, and I wanted to honor their experience and recognize that he sat at a different place at the table than I sat. And I might have rose-colored glasses because I'm a youngest child. And they thought everything I did, I walked on water because I'm the youngest child and an only girl. I mean, I have a different perspective than some of my brothers that grew up in the middle of some of the more difficult times in the family. So maybe they earned the right to be a little bitter about some of the things they went through. Anyway, the point is, get your heart in the right place. This is something that I learned from the book Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When the Stakes Are High. People don't respond to what you say. They respond to ... how you say it. Except that they actually don't. They respond to where your heart actually is. We're not fooling anybody. We might think we've rehearsed the words, and we might think that we've delivered it in a way that's calm and whatever. But if I really think that I'm right and that you're wrong and that you need to just be the one to change and meet me halfway and apologize and whatever else, it's not going to work. I need to genuinely come forward and apologize for my part and ask in humility to work together to mend the relationship, to be open to changing the language that I've written, whatever it is. My heart has to be in the right place. But the positive side of it, as hard as that can be, is that once our heart is in the right place, it can be incredibly disarming and powerful. And so we can say the wrong words and mess all of that up. But if our heart is in the right place, people tend to pick up on the vibe, and it'll be okay. So try that first before you go into a difficult conversation. There's also the power of what's called a sincere apology, also by Crucial Conversations. If you just say, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize that was insensitive and that those words would hurt your feelings. Of course, I'm willing to change the language and to work it around a little bit to honor your perspective. Now, there are practical limits, right? Like, you may not be writing a version for everybody. You may be writing your story. And if they want to write theirs, they're perfectly within their right to write their version. That's fine. That's one perspective to take. I'm not telling you what you should do here, just giving you some thoughts. But I am telling you there's tremendous power in the sincere apology. And I also have a technique I want to share with you right now because it's really powerful and it's good. And I call it the advance apology. And it goes a little something like this. I've written a family story, maybe for a client, maybe for my own family, and I want some feedback on it. And if it involves someone who's living, or if it involves the family, I say, I've written this and I would like your feedback. And before you read it, I just have to tell you something. I am so sorry. I don't know even for what yet, but I'm sure you'll tell me. And then I ask them, please just tell me if I've stepped on your toes, if the language is wrong, if I got a fact wrong. Look, memories are infallible. So just let me know your perspective, and I promise we'll try to work it out, right? Let's just talk to each other and it'll be fine. But I won't know if you don't tell me. So please tell me. So that's how I approach it. And it usually works. And I just apologize in advance for any missteps. But recognize, are you dealing with a reasonable person? I mentioned adult children of immature parents, and your siblings might be acting out the same patterns as your immature parents or whatever. You cannot please some people. Some people will just be toxic and they will criticize you no matter what. And in those situations, you need to save yourself. That's kind of the takeaway, is protect your own energy as well and recognize who you're dealing with, and don't try to please everybody if it's impossible. And recognize also that outsized emotions, you might write a little thing. I've written things again about siblings of my clients, whatever, children of my clients, and it just seems so innocuous on the page, but there's a whole iceberg underneath that little language, and it represents a pattern that they haven't said something about for years, and they've just been keeping their mouths shut. But finally you wrote this and it's going to be published, and it's bugging the heck out of them, and it's bubbling up, and you're the messenger. So watch out. Just recognize that there's a lot of perspective there, and try to be patient, because this stuff can bring things out of people that is not their finest hour. Try to be generous and patient with people, especially if it's a time of grief or high emotions. If you're writing your own story and you're wondering what to do about the abuser, the bully, the dirtbag, whatever, you may need to get some legal advice. I cannot give you legal advice today because that question is fraught with issues. Yes, there's protection for telling the truth, but people can sue you for anything, right? They can sue you even if you told the truth, and you still have to go through it. Most people are not going to sue you, especially if it's your little memoir that, it's whatever, but you might want to get some legal advice. But one thing I know for sure is that you want to disguise your characters. If you don't get written permission from them, then disguise the heck out of them. Create a composite character, make the gender different, the age, the occupation, whatever. Just make it so that the person that reads it would be like, well, clearly I'm not this terrible person you're talking about. They don't see themselves in it. They probably won't, because they won't see themselves. Just disguise it enough that they won't. And there are whole topics and forums about that, but just be aware there can be issues. In general, though, focus on what hard things taught you. If you put the focus of your memoir on what you learned from it and how you got through the hard things, how you grew and became a survivor, how it taught you strength and resilience, or how you healed from trauma, then it's not about the mistakes of other people. And that's generally where you want to come from, right? Put the light on you and your story. And we'll talk about how to deal with the past as well. And focus in all your stories with a mindset on toward transformation. Our purpose, well, and let me say, there's an adage in storytelling that every great story is about transformation. So look for the growth, look for the change, don't look for the trauma. We need to look for the moments of trauma in order to come to the transformation, right? They're important to talk about it. But the purpose is how to get through the other side, or what was the upside. And again, we're going to talk about ancestor stories more in a minute, because this is a lot harder if we don't know how they felt or how they grew. But especially in your own story, in your own family, focus on coming out the other side. So just look for how hard things resulted in growth, in your own growth, or in the growth of your family or your ancestors. You might not know what happened to a particular ancestor, but you might know the trajectory of your family. You might know how they survived a difficult circumstance. And the fact that they survived meant you all are here. That is growth and transformation. You might focus on how generations have grown and overcome patterns and become better. I've worked on some family stories before where that was really the takeaway. There was an ugly thing that happened in the past, but the current generation was making a choice to become better. And that was the transformation story. So there are different ways of approaching that. So let's talk about some tips for ancestor stories. Again, focus on what you learned from it. Because if you don't know how your ancestor felt, don't we wish, man, where are those ancestor journals? Oh, they didn't write journals because they were too busy surviving the hard stuff, right? Every dang day was hard for them. They didn't have the luxury of writing about their lives. That was a gift they gave us to have a little extra capacity because we're not starving. we have the ability to write. So focus on when reading their hard stuff, what did it teach you? How do you look at your own gifts, your gratitude, just the profound gratitude for the dumb luck of being born today with their DNA and with all the resources because they survived it? So look for what it taught you, or another lesson, a theme from their story that influenced you. You can be the narrator, right? You can give some commentary on lessons learned from the perspective of a descendant. Something else to do, and that is paint the context of a life well lived, right? If you learn of a mistake or an unsavory part of a story or a secret, recognize that every person is a whole person. You might be faced with a paper trail where the only real thing you know about them was their mistake, and that's not really very fair, is it? Like, what if someone discovered my life and the only thing they found out about was like the biggest mistakes I've ever made, and that was the one thing they chose to write about? Well, I don't think that's very fair. Do you? I mean, come on. So let's treat our ancestors like we would want to be treated. I'm sure they did some good things too. Even abusers have their strong points, and I'm not apologizing for abuse in any way, but I am saying that every person has their own traumas, the things that they that made them the way they were, the way that they were abused, the patterns they inherited, the time and place in which they lived. So paint the context, if you can, of the other things they did. I have an ancestor who's kind of a scoundrel. You know, he was back in the 1600s, he came here, and there are a lot of really crazy things that he did, and he just was kind of a scoundrel. But dang it, he's the ancestor to like 10,000 people now. So he survived, and I got a little bit of Job Tyler in me, and so maybe I have a little bit of scoundrel, and I can smile at that, you know? So just look for ways to frame those things, because may we all be judged by more than our mistakes. Right? We're all more than that. And we also must not judge people of the past on today's cultural norms. Now, yes, there are some things that are truly terrible in any age, and I'm not suggesting we whitewash it or apologize for it or whatever else, but we can recognize that people were reared in an era where that was what they were born with. If you were slavery, for example, is such a difficult, touchy topic because we may have both sides of it. We may have ancestors who were enslaved, and we may have ancestors who were the holders of slaves, and they were maybe born into that life, and what was their mindset. I'm not apologizing, but I am suggesting a little empathy on all sides of it and just grappling with what's the right approach. Sometimes we don't need to come right out and give all the commentary. Sometimes we find some facts and we can hint around it. Maybe we don't need to spell it out for readers. We can let readers read between the lines a little. I'll give you an example. In a story that I worked on for a woman named Norma Keir, her father served in World War II. She grew up in Canada, and he came back not the same. And he struggled with alcoholism and PTSD, which they didn't really even know how to deal with at the time. And she loved her dad, but he was difficult, you know? And how do we approach his alcoholism without disrespecting him? And we just chose to be delicate about it. And largely what we said was he was never quite the same after the war. And we told a story in which she was getting married and they were getting ready to make her wedding cake, and the rum which they had bought for the rum cake had disappeared because dad had drunk it. Well, telling that one story tells a whole lot about her childhood without having to get into all the details, right? He was never quite the same and he drank the rum. Well, you can fill in the rest. So here's some language to consider. We may not always know the facts, right? The stories that we're told might be hard to substantiate. So we can use words like a whispered rumor, or the family story goes, or conflicting accounts say, or this person was accused of. We can say perhaps, I wonder, maybe. There are practical limits to perhapsing. Don't overstep too far. But we can use some of that language to have a conversation with our readers about maybe what they were thinking, or we can ask questions. We will never know, or I can imagine that. So these are some things. You can take a screenshot of this if you want to grapple with language for yourself. And then consider, does a story need to be told at all? Again, I'm not advocating that we whitewash the past and that we just erase difficult things, but I was given a perspective. So I grew up in a religious environment, and there was this idea of repentance, right? That someone has the opportunity to repent of their misdeeds in this life, and that we shouldn't just keep bringing stuff up that they've worked on. So maybe if we're telling the stories of the things they've done, we're just perpetuating the misdeeds and not allowing them to repent and move on. Again, I'm not saying that is the answer. I'm just saying consider different angles and possibilities before you write your ancestor's story. So, should you reveal a secret? Well, will any good come of it? Is there a reason to? Is it your right to reveal it or tell it? Have you made a promise? Do others have a right to know, though? I mean, are there descendants that should know the truth? Is someone's safety at risk? I've mentioned abuse and potential patterns of abuse and other victims and other people that may need courage to come forward. Do family members want to know? I mean, let's be honest. We've all got family members that just really want to believe that everything was perfect. And if you told them, it would shatter their reality. And they're too old to burden with this stuff. So just don't, right? Just consider your motive and what people want to know. If you're a professional genealogist, also ask the question, if I uncover something that you might find unsettling, do you want to know all the facts? And as a professional genealogist, you probably have a responsibility to report all the facts, but it's a good idea to have that groundwork laid before you lay on something really heavy that they may not have been expecting. And sometimes we just report the facts. Sometimes we don't need to editorialize. Sometimes we don't need to tell a whole story about it. We just leave a paper trail and let people form their own conclusions, because not every story needs to be made into a big editorialized story. Maybe it's hard to write about and it just feels like an energy drain. So write the facts and move on to one that you do find inspiring, Not everything warrants our best energy. And sometimes in dealing with the past, the best thing we can do is honor the struggle, the suffering. I've been known to go to a cemetery when I knew that something really sad happened to somebody. And I just stood on the grave and said, I'm so sorry that happened to you. You deserved better. And I don't know, but it somehow felt healing to say the words, because I'm not sure that person ever heard those words in life, I sometimes think there's power in just honoring what they lived through and what they survived and the injustices that they faced. Sometimes there's not an upside, Sometimes there's not an upside. I have what I call the Meet the Ancestor test. After I've written a story, I think of my ancestor as a real person, because I do. I'm kind of a spiritual person, and this might be too woo-woo for your taste, and that's okay. But I like to think that there is another side, and someday maybe I'll get to meet those ancestors. And if I get to stand across from them and they're holding in their hands the story I've written, will I be proud of the words I put on the page about that person? Or would I maybe shrink a little bit and feel like maybe I would rather I have edited it a little bit if I knew they were going to read it? So maybe we should treat our ancestors like we treat the living, and we should consider how they would feel if they read it. That's my Meet the Ancestor test. If I'm proud of it, then I think then it's probably okay. That's just the energy I approach it with. But as I mentioned before, sometimes you must speak your truth. It's time. It's time to uncover the secrets. It's time to bring those ugly things out into the light so that we have a chance to heal. This is the first time in history when victims could come forward, when they would be believed, when we had a legal framework, when we had mental health support, when we understood mental health issues and substance abuse and trauma. It's a time. when we can facilitate healing. I heard an interesting term the other day called an intergenerational errand. It was from the lady that does couples therapy. I think it's a series on Showtime. Anyway, she's an amazing therapist, and she talked about this idea that we inherit stuff, we inherit trauma. Sometimes we take on intergenerational errands more than we should too, and maybe we need to let some stuff go. But speak your truth if you must. Get support, please. Recognize that this stuff is hard because it's hard, and it may take more out of you than you realize. And so don't be afraid to get some therapy, to lean on other people, to journal, to give yourself physically some recovery time. If you are the hearer of a story, I need a little recovery time after those interviews. I mean, I just do. I don't know how therapists do it all day long, frankly, but get some support, because in the end, you can come out of it with a story that changes the ending. I believe that when you tell your story today, it changes the ending for you, because when you finish this process, you will be a different person than when you started the writing. Think about all that you've processed, all that you've come to terms with, the healing that you didn't even know you needed, that you didn't know family needed. You can change the story for the future. You can help inspire a young person to understand just how tough they are because of what they've inherited and what they can overcome. You may inspire someone who's not even born yet. This work is powerful, but you're doing the hard part of it right now. So give yourself some grace. And I think that's my last slide. I guess I just wanted to show one more. If Heidi can do it, so can we, right? Here she is living her best life at 90. It changed her story too. She told me that she's even last week I talked to her, and she said, you know, if it hadn't been for this book, I think I'd be declining really fast right now. Because she's just kind of going into herself, you know. She was old and very independent, fiercely independent. Any girl that can survive at the age of 9 on her own can also survive at the age of 90. But she's outlived everybody, and she's just quietly living out the last years of her life. And then she came forward, and now she's a celebrity in her town. Everywhere she goes, people want to talk to her. They want to take her to dinner. They're taking her to the opera. She's speaking and using her voice and being an inspiration. I mean, it's incredible. We couldn't have seen that coming, that she would be interviewed by news outlets around the world at this age. I mean, you just never know when you start on a journey. When I first met with her, I thought it was going to be a quick little family history, because I certainly was not qualified to write a World War II Germany story. Thank you very much. But 5 years later, here we are, and it changed me too, because I love her, and these things change you. So that concludes my talk. Here again is that link to the toolkit that you can get. And now we'll take questions for another few minutes, Barb, and then you can decide when you want to cut off the recording, and we can stick around. I have a feeling there will be more questions than we can get to in the recording time, so we can do some off air as well. How about that, Barb?
Sounds like a plan. Indeed. And you can take the slides down. Don't worry. All of her presentation will also be in the recording, so you can pick up all of the materials that way as well. And I did catch at the beginning of the talk, Rhonda shared a whole list of wonderful links, and I've been taking notes here too, which I will include in the notes. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda. I love the idea of asking yourself whether a story warrants your best energy, and, you know, taking the time to put something down, to dig that deep, to deal with those hard things, has to be worth your best energy to go into it. Sometimes it takes some digging to figure that out first, which is important too. But enough with my thoughts. We have a lot of questions here. Let me just blitz through these. Again, I've made little notes with a green check mark when I heard you. So let me pop through these as I get there. And if I miss something, please just drop it again with the 3 question marks. So Richard Baldwin asks, my father bore 4 children with my mother, but also married another woman in a different state and bore 2 children. My brothers and sisters know, but our children do not. How could I, or should I, address this information in a public genealogy site? I have another difficult situation, less current, but we'll address that one separately. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so your children don't know. I mean, I would first ask,
his children do know.
your children do know, but the other children, the other family's children do not know. Is that correct?
I don't know
right?
the state of, I don't know the
Okay.
state of that. Not
So
state
that's,
of,
I guess, a question to learn who knows what, and do they want to know? Because eventually it's probably going to come out. Somebody's going to get a DNA test and they're going to find it. Like, we're in a day when they may discover it without having any context. And they may come to you angry. Why didn't you tell us? Or you knew and we didn't. And I mean, you have to
Yeah.
kind of consider all the sides of what might happen and consider the possibility of, is there a way to gently reach out to somebody? Can you get their contact information? Do you have it? And could you be a facilitator of, I have some information that if that's part of your family's story, do you want to know? You know,
Yeah.
people can be leery. They may think you're trying to get something or scam them out of something. Having those initial outreach conversations is tricky. I sometimes banter with AI on like language and different approaches. But I usually just sit with it. I draft it, I sleep on it, I come back, I beat it up from different angles and consider different possibilities of what might happen if I go down this path. What are the consequences? There are consequences either way.
Yeah.
Which consequences can you live with and which ones can't you live with?
He clarified that in that case, the children don't know, but the siblings do. But I appreciate the general answer because actually it's not completely unrelated to the kind of thing that I went through in myself. So Gwyn asks, how do you end a project with non-participating members? I would like to hear how others deal with this. Is it too rude to draft some kind of general agreement beforehand, like a contract?
So clarify what you mean by end a project. Do you mean sometimes I'll tell you, there are some clients and people that you just realize I cannot deal with. You are toxic and I need to extract myself from this situation.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's what you mean, but yeah.
Gwen, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and clarify, as long as we can just keep these succinct. I can't find you on all the various
Or if you want to
screens here.
post again.
There,
Okay, Gwen.
she says, I meant ending the sharing of information with the non-participating participants. I assume people that are written about in a piece.
Yeah, if they're, it's a situation. I think I need more information. I'd need to sit down and like talk. So what I would recommend is that you find a trusted person, if you have a writing group or a colleague, that you can share back and forth and just talk through the facts of the situation and try to get some perspective about the next step. I have a professional group where we write client stories, and we often, in a confidential environment, say, I'm dealing with a sticky wicket. What do you think I should do here? And we are each other's trusted person, right? And different people in the room of 3 or 4 people will come at it from a different angle, and that sort of group processing can be so invaluable.
Yeah. So Ron Gilmore asks, sensitive items, when the folks are involved are dead, who cares? It's a great question.
Yeah. By the way, hi, Ron. I know you. So yeah, I mean, that's a perspective, right? The people that are involved are dead. Fine. Tell their story. I mean, I just like to use the ancestor test, though. Did I tell it sensitively? Did I honor them in the process? And if I did, then great. Did I do it with some perspective, with some context? But hey, you know, they're not, especially if you don't believe that there's anybody on the other side. I mean, if your personal belief system is that what matters is the here and now, then you kind of have more of a green light, right? So I can't tell you what to believe.
I often ask myself how I will feel 10 years from now when I look back on what I did.
Oh, what a good, right. It's not the meet the ancestor test, it's meet the future me test.
I can be pretty brutal.
Yeah. Oof.
Oof.
Again, it's also like, what can I live with?
Yeah.
You know, there's going to be a consequence. So pick your consequence.
Yeah. All right. Richard asks a follow-up question. The other situation relates to grandparents. One had an affair while married to my grandmother. It was published in a newspaper because it involved child custody battles. Separately, later, there are many papers and much history regarding my grandmother's mental difficulties and commitment. How should I include in family history, and how?
Yeah.
You've got a story there, Richard.
There's a whole story. And man, you got to love those society pages, right? They don't make them like they used to. The gossip
social
pages,
media.
Oh, well, that's true. Maybe they do make them like they used to. But yes, the society pages can be a wonderful source of the real story. Yeah, it sounds like it's already out. It sounds like it's a public record. The paper trail is there. And it's part of the family story. And I would be inclined to say that it sounds like there's a mental health situation underlying this. And that can be a very compelling reason to write about it, because mental health struggles are often inherited. And you may have living family members who need to understand themselves better and understand that they're not the first one, the only one who's ever walked this path, and that maybe it's not their fault. They have something in their DNA that is just the set of cards they were dealt, and it may help them process and maybe get help if they haven't even been able to before. So I think there are good reasons sometimes for telling the whole story.
I can add, again, speaking for the future, another way to look at it is, if these pieces are documented in public records, what are you adding to that context, often closer to it, to be able to tell a story that future generations looking at the same paper record may not see?
Oh, that's amazing advice, Barbara. You know more in your head and from the patterns you've seen that no one else, that context will be lost if you don't.
Yeah.
And you may be able to do it more sensitively and with more perspective than someone looking at it with only the paper trail.
Right. And then I always try to bring up the fact that not every story has to be published publicly. There are many ways in which stories could be captured that are, in the case of your journal, entirely private, or in ways that are shared with family members as they age into an ability to handle it. So yeah. So let's keep going. There's so many here. Thank you. I'm trying to follow these in order. So again, pop in if I've missed something. Thank you, Kathy, that we've already addressed that one. I see you coming in here with, let's see. Yeah, sorry. And going down, Bill, I see you've got something to me directly, so I'll follow up with that in a second. And Gwen, my cousin told her brothers a story about a battle with mental health through his art. So I guess that's another way to express a story. Writing and art and music and storytelling, audio, everything is a story.
Yes, and side note, there's great evidence that artistic expression is just as healing as therapy as well. So if you need an outlet, consider some art in your life too.
Absolutely. And also just observing art, exploring art can help you, deal with it. So at this point, I've blitzed through the questions that we had, and I see many of you here. For all of you in the recording, I want to honor your time and end the recording here. But all of you who are still present, special offer for being here present. Let's go ahead and continue the conversation briefly, another 10 minutes or so, to respect Rhonda's time, but still close our recording. So thank you. All of you can just stay on as we button this up, and we will follow in the commentary and notes that will follow in the recording. How about that? So thank you very much.